Colonel Isaac Voss stood before the towering Varkesh High Council, his face unreadable, his posture rigid from decades of military discipline. The great hall of the ruling caste shimmered with opulent displays of war trophies, blades from conquered species, ceremonial armor from fallen foes, each a silent declaration of the Varkesh's perceived superiority. But it was not the weight of history that made the air thick with tension. It was the laughter. "Your kind is amusing, Voss," sneered Counselor Zion, a veteran of countless planetary skirmishes. "You believe because you have sat in this chamber long enough. You understand power." He leaned forward, golden eyes gleaming with contempt. "You speak as if humanity holds dominion over war. Yet you cower behind treaties, behind trade agreements. Where is this strength you claim?" Voss had given this speech before, time and again, and each time it had fallen on deaf ears. The Varkesh were a warrior race, bred for conquest, their culture steeped in notions of honor through battle. Diplomacy was an insult to them, restraint a sign of weakness. He had once believed they could learn, perhaps even see past their arrogance, but he had long since abandoned that hope. "We don't claim dominion over war," Voss said evenly. "We've simply perfected it." His words did not have the sobering effect he intended. Instead, another round of derisive laughter echoed through the hall. He exhaled slowly, hands clasped behind his back, resisting the urge to rub his temple. He had seen this before, this smug certainty from species that had never faced humanity's full wrath. It was always the same. They saw Earth's preference for diplomacy as a flaw, a miscalculation. "We are not some trembling empire to be cowed by threats," Zion continued, his voice rich with amusement. "Your worlds are soft. Your people would sooner negotiate than fight. You lack the will for true war." A murmur of agreement swept through the council. The Varkesh elite, draped in ceremonial sashes denoting victories from long-forgotten battles, smirked and nodded to one another. Voss had seen this play out before in the histories of other fallen species, the ones who mistook humanity's patience for weakness. He had pleaded with them, too. It never worked. "You misunderstand," Voss said, voice measured. "You assume diplomacy is our only course because you have never seen what happens when we abandon it." Silence followed, brief but tangible. Then the chamber doors burst open. A young Varkesh warrior, breathless and wild-eyed, stumbled forward and fell to one knee. "Honored Council," he panted, "it is done. Our forces have struck the human colony. The Earthborn will learn their place." For the first time, Voss felt his stomach sink. "Fools!" he muttered. The council chamber erupted in triumphant cheers. The Varkesh commanders pounded their fists against their armored chests, reveling in their perceived victory. Voss, however, remained motionless, his fingers curled into fists at his sides. "Casualties?" Zion inquired, his tone almost bored. "Minimal, honored one. The colony was taken easily. The humans have been subdued." Zion turned his golden eyes back to Voss. "Tell me, Colonel, is this the moment when we should fear your people? When do the diplomats come crawling, begging for peace?" Voss stepped forward, and though he was dwarfed by the towering Varkesh, his presence filled the room. His voice dropped to a near whisper, carrying with it a weight the council failed to grasp. "You don't understand what you've just done." Zion grinned, exposing serrated teeth. "Then enlighten me." Voss exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "We try to teach you. We gave you every opportunity to avoid this. But you never listened, do you?" He turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over the council. "You look at us and see diplomats, traders, explorers. You think we lack warriors. But the truth is, humanity has only ever known war." Several of the younger council members scoffed, but Zion merely studied him, amusement giving way to curiosity. "Is that so?" he mused. "You assume restraint means fear," Voss continued, taking another step forward, voice like steel. "You believe our preference for peace means we are incapable of war. You mock our patience as if it is a flaw. But I was there when Earth burned under invasion. I was there when we faced extinction." His jaw tightened. "And I was there when we made them regret it." The warrior who had delivered the report shifted uneasily. Even Zion's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. The moment you sent your warriors to spill human blood, your fate was sealed, Voss continued. Because now, for the first time in your history, you will understand what it means to be prey. A hush settled over the chamber. Then a sound, a low, insistent chime emanating from the council's communication panel. One of the counselors, still smirking, activated the holo display, and the room froze. A massive fleet loomed at the edge of the Varkash home system, warships unlike anything the Varkash had ever faced. The lead vessel, a Terran dreadnought, pulsed with the energy of charged railguns, its hull adorned with the insignia of Earth's elite fleet. Smaller attack ships flanked it, weapons primed. The transmission that followed was brief. "This is General Abigail Carter of the United Terran Command. You have taken our people. You will return them immediately." A pause, then, "or we will take them back." The counselors looked to one another, some in dawning horror, others in disbelief. Zion's smug confidence wavered as he studied the display, as he realized the sheer scale of what they faced. Voss watched it all with the tired resignation of a man who had seen this before. "You should have listened," he murmured. But they never did. The Varkash fleet scrambled to respond, warships igniting their thrusters as alarms howled across the capital. Officers barked orders, rushing to defensive positions as the planetary shields powered up, casting an eerie shimmer over the world below. The Varkash had warred for centuries, had conquered species that dared resist, had built an empire upon the bones of the weak. This was simply another challenge, another species to break. Zion stood in the high war chamber, his claws tapping against the stone table as he surveyed the incoming fleet. It was larger than expected, more disciplined in formation, but they had seen such displays before. The council murmured reassurances to one another, old warriors recounting victories over lesser foes. Zion, however, remained silent. Colonel Voss sat across from him, shackled now, guards flanking him on either side. Despite his restraints, his expression was unreadable. He simply watched. The transmission from the Terran fleet played again over the chamber speakers. General Abigail Carter's voice was calm, measured, carrying none of the bravado the Varkash were accustomed to from wartime posturing. There was no threat, no ultimatum beyond the simple statement, "Return our people, or we take them back." A murmur swept through the council as ships in orbit reported first contact. Varkash fighters surged toward the human fleet, sleek and fast, their pilots honed through centuries of war. They had crushed lesser fleets with ease before, swift and brutal, before their enemies had time to react. The first engagement lasted 42 seconds. Voss did not need to see the battle unfold. He had seen it before. He had lived it. The moment the first Varkash ship was reduced to molten debris, he could already predict the rest. The high war chamber fell silent as reports flooded in, the confident murmurs turning in a hushed disbelief. On the massive tactical display, the Varkash fleet's markers flickered and disappeared one by one, as if some unseen predator moved through them, swallowing them whole. "Impossible," one of the younger warlords muttered. "How?" another demanded, slamming a fist onto the table. Voss exhaled slowly. "Because they don't fight like you do." The first wave of human warships had not engaged in the traditional method the Varkash had expected. There was no posturing, no drawn-out maneuvering, no grand battle cries. Instead, Earth's fleet moved with clinical precision, targeting command ships first, severing the fleet's ability to coordinate. Advanced AI-assisted targeting systems had calculated the optimal destruction sequence before the Varkash pilots had even realized they were under attack. And where the Varkash relied on brute force, humanity had honed warfare into a science. Railgun slugs, traveling at near relativistic speeds, ripped through Varkash hulls before their shields could adapt. Swarms of autonomous drones jammed communications, disrupting formations. Pulse missiles obliterated reinforcement points, carving gaps in their defenses. The Varkash fleet was not merely being defeated, it was being dismantled. Zion's claws clenched, his confidence slipping. "We still hold the capital," he said, as if speaking the words would make them true. "Their ships mean nothing if they cannot land." Voss turned his gaze to the display, where the first wave of human drop pods was already breaching the atmosphere. The Varkesh had always prided themselves on their ground warfare. Their warriors, massive and imposing, clad in battle-scarred armor, had crushed entire civilizations underfoot. No species had ever dared invade Varkesh Prime itself. Until now, the first sign of Earth's arrival was not the thunder of gunfire, nor the clash of swords. It was the silence. Varkesh outposts reported disturbances in their targeting systems, then complete blackouts. Automated defenses, turrets, shielding arrays, communications relays simply ceased to function. There was no warning before the first orbital strike cratered an entire forward base, reducing it to glass. Then the sky burned. The drop pods fell in waves, blackened husks slicing through the air before hammering into the surface with seismic force. And then the humans emerged. They were not like the diplomats the Varkesh had scoffed at. They were not the traitors who sought peace through compromise. These were the ones Voss had warned them about. Terran shock troopers, clad in reinforced exosuits, moved with brutal efficiency, their weapons decimating anything in their path. Advanced combat drones flanked them, providing covering fire as infantry cleared entire streets with pulse rifles and micro-explosives. Mechs, towering steel war machines, strode through the battlefield like ancient titans, cutting through the elite Varkesh warriors with mechanized precision. The Varkesh, so used to fighting enemies who feared them, found themselves hunted. Zion watched in horror as his greatest warriors fell in minutes. They fought with valor. But valor meant nothing when the enemy had already mapped every possible outcome before the first shot had been fired. The Terrans did not fight for honor. They fought to win. A new transmission arrived. General Carter again. This is your final warning. Surrender the hostages. Lay down your weapons. Zion's claws scraped against the table. Surrender. The word was an abomination, a stain that no Varkesh warlord had ever accepted. To yield was to become prey. To submit was to invite extinction. His eyes snapped to Voss. We could still fight. Voss met his gaze without hesitation. No, you can't. A shudder ran through the palace as the first Terran artillery strikes hit the city perimeter. Voss could already hear it. The distant rhythmic thud of approaching mechs, the sharp crack of railgun fire, the muffled shouts of Varkesh warriors being cut down. The capital, the seat of the mighty Varkesh Empire, was falling. Zion's breathing grew unsteady. His warriors, his empire, everything his people had built. It was all crumbling before him. This wasn't a war. It was an extermination of the old ways. For the first time, real fear flickered in his golden eyes. He turned to Voss, voice hoarse. What do we do? Voss had no sympathy. He had given them every chance, every warning. He had watched too many species make the same mistake. You surrender, he said, before they decide you're not worth the trouble. The war chamber trembled with another distant explosion. The human forces were almost here. Zion's claws trembled at his sides. And then slowly, he bowed his head, The capital of Varkesh Prime lay in ruins. The once proud city, now reduced to a smoldering shadow of its former glory. Terran shock troops marched through the streets, their boots crushing the remnants of Varkesh architecture beneath them. Every building was a tomb, every ruin a symbol of an empire's collapse. The ground was littered with the fallen, Varkesh warriors, once feared across the galaxy, now broken and scattered like chaff in the wind. Voss stood at the edge of the palace, watching the smoke rise from the heart of the city. His expression was stoic, but there was a glimmer in his eyes, a rare satisfaction tempered by years of painful experience. He had seen the end of countless wars, had watched empires fall, but this one felt different. This wasn't a battle of pride or strategy. It was a reckoning, and humanity had delivered it. General Abigail Carter stood beside him, her face grim but resolute. Her uniform, streaked with the grime of battle, seemed almost out of place against the backdrop of destruction. She had led the Terran forces to victory, but there would be no celebration. Earth's victory was complete, but the war was over only for one side. Varkesh Prime would never be the same. We've won, Voss said softly, as if speaking to himself. But at what cost? Carter's gaze never left the horizon, her mind already on the terms she would deliver to the broken remnants of the Varkesh Empire. Every war has a cost, Colonel, she replied. But this one was theirs to pay. Voss nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as a group of Varkesh commanders were escorted before them. Their once regal postures were now hunched, their faces contorted in disbelief and fear. The proud warriors who had mocked humanity's strength only days ago were now nothing more than defeated soldiers, trembling beneath the weight of their own defeat. Zion, the leader of the Varkesh High Council, was among them. His golden eyes were no longer filled with arrogance, but with something else, a deep, unsettling fear. His body was battered, his armor torn and scorched, but it was his spirit that seemed the most broken. "Do you understand now?" Voss asked, his voice cold. "This wasn't just about the colony. It was about your entire species' survival." Zion raised his head, but there was no pride in his gaze. "We were fools," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "We underestimated you, underestimated humanity, and now you see the consequences," Voss replied, his voice unyielding. "There are no more warnings, no more chances. Earth's demands will be met, or the next time, we won't stop." The Varkesh leader's head bowed again, a final gesture of submission. Voss had expected it. Zion had never believed that Earth's forces would carry out their threats, but now the full weight of the Terran military was unmistakably clear. Carter stepped forward, her posture proud but measured. She didn't speak to the Varkesh High Council directly, but instead addressed the soldiers who had gathered in the courtyard, waiting for their orders. "This is the end of the line for the Varkesh," she said, her voice carrying the weight of an empire's mandate. "We are taking our people back. The hostages you have held will be freed. Your military will be dismantled, and your technology will be dismantled. We will leave you with enough to rebuild, but only on our terms." Zion's eyes flickered with anger, but it was a fleeting emotion, quickly replaced by the grim realization of his new reality. "We will comply," he said through gritted teeth. "But how long will this peace last? The Varkesh will never forget." Carter's smile was thin. "Then they'll be reminded. The next time, it won't be a negotiation. It'll be the extinction of your race." The council members looked at one another, their faces a mixture of resentment and resignation. They knew what the humans were capable of, and while their pride would never fully heal, the reality was clear. Earth was now the dominant force in this part of the galaxy. No one would dare challenge them again. "The terms are simple," Carter continued, her voice steady. "You will disarm your military. No more raiding, no more conquests. The galaxy is not yours to take. Any attempt to break these terms will result in immediate retaliation." "And the hostages?" Zion asked, his voice softer now, more fragile. "They will be freed immediately," Voss said, stepping forward. "The humans you've taken will return to their families. Any Varkesh who cooperates will be allowed to leave in peace." Zion's golden eyes darkened with a flicker of emotion. Grief, perhaps? Voss couldn't tell. "You expect us to live under your thumb? To accept your rule without retaliation?" "We don't expect you to accept anything," Voss replied coldly. "We don't care what you think, but you will live by our rules, or you will cease to exist." The Varkesh leader swallowed hard. He seemed to weigh his options, the weight of centuries of pride and conquest pressing down on him. And then, with a slow and deliberate motion, he turned to his council, his fellow commanders, and spoke in their tongue, the words heavy with a sense of finality. They had no choice. They would comply. "We yield," Zion said at last, his voice hoarse. "But know this. You may have won this battle, Colonel, General, but you have not won the war." Carter's eyes narrowed. "The war is over, Zion. For you. For your people. And the next time you dare challenge humanity, there won't be a Varkesh empire left to avenge." Voss turned away from the defeated council and nodded to the Terran soldiers who had gathered around them. The hum of engines filled the air as transports arrived to carry out Earth's orders. The hostages were freed, the military dismantled. The last vestiges of the Varkesh Empire's glory would soon be nothing but rubble. As they departed, Voss looked once more at the city behind him, at the broken remains of the once proud civilization. He had warned them. He had pleaded with them. And in the end, they had paid the price. There would be no more mockery, no more underestimation. Humanity's time had come, and no one would forget it. The Terran flag, bold and unyielding, fluttered in the wind over Varkesh Prime.